Hi everyone, I'm Simone. I'm from Studio Nomad. Nomad is a branding agency. We're based in London. We do all kinds of work. We mostly do a lot of stuff around sports and entertainment, but we branch out to other fun things as well. So I'll start by playing our sizzle. I mean, we're a branding studio. We love sizzle, so I'll play that, which shows a bit of our work.
Make some noise for your mama's favorite agitator. I ain't saying none, unless I'm speaking for the paper. The great debates on my life is like an elevator. I'm going down, if you walk with me, then you walk with say so. Acting like I don't know, and of course I blame my boots for the faults of my toe. Living life in the days, I don't know where I'm going. I get back to the airport like honey, I'm home. Boy, I bathe in sin and still I cast the first stone. Satan saw me again and said, it's gone. You ever walk my way? I never felt at home. I never read this place. That is hard, yeah. Shit. I can feel you. I can feel you every day. I can feel you.
So, Nomad, we're 10 years old this year, which is really exciting and fun. I started when I was an intern, which is wild to me. I started in design specifically, and because we were a smaller studio, not as many people as you see in the photos at the time, designers tended to do a bit of everything, like if a logo needed animated, anyone that knew the software would just jump in and do it. And so that's how I started into motion, by just doing little bits and slowly doing more and more until I was pretty much 50-50. At that point, I realized, actually, I'm a really shit designer and I'm much better at motion. And I think everyone was really happy with that decision because I really hated grids and I just ignored them every time. So I decided to go into motion full time, and the one thing that I had that made me not want to do that was, at the time in the industry, I saw a bit of a pattern in which motion was something to make case studies look pretty or a bit of an afterthought, which just made me sad. I really wanted to figure out how motion can make a big creative impact, specifically in branding, because clients tend to come to us for the design side, and I saw that potential in motion, and I didn't want to just animate someone else's ideas. So a lot of the work that we've been doing over the years is finding how we can do that as a team, and really going into projects, making the most of motion. So a big shift for us, and for me mentally, has been stopping looking at it from it's designers plus motion designers on a project, and we're actually just one creative team. So we go into any project, and they're all different, but always from this point of view, and whoever kind of people it needs, they just go into the project. So I thought it would be nice to chat about 3 different projects in which we do this in different ways, because every project has different needs. So the first one is more about motion as a core expression of the brand. The second one is a motion-first approach, which you don't get to do very often, but it is wonderful when you do get to do it. And the last one is about that kind of relationship between motion and static feeding back into each other constantly. So first project, Tottenham Hotspur. I'm sure especially here in the north, no one really cares about this club. I don't really like football, so bear with me. But we started working with them for a rebrand and strategy and everything, really. So I'll play the sizzle that we did of all the work, and then I'll go into the proper details of the motion. Thanks. So for Spurs, we very much took the approach of like, how can every single discipline in our studio reflect what the brand stands for at its core? So I didn't write these words, but they were kind of the manifesto of what the club stood for. It was very much about doing things differently, despite all odds, and doing things in their own way, which kind of got encapsulated by, the Tottenham Hotspur way, white hot. And that was very much about capturing the intensity of the game, the spirit that they take as a club, and that kind of feeling of rising the temperature and raising it constantly. So in motion, our goal was to actually use motion as more than a treatment, but as a core expression of the brand, to show the personality, and how we approach this, because this was going through a massive rebrand. They are expanding what they do as a club and the brand. It needed to be flexible enough to adapt to all that, but also consistent so it still feels Spur, which was a very key thing, is that authentic feeling. So it constantly had to be anchored in the brand personality and the strategy. So everything kind of came down to this idea of raising the temperature. And we started exploring these heat treatments that kind of blur the edges, and they become a bit more intense and shiny and hot. And we just started looking at it in a bunch of different ways. How can you do that? Like by, burning from the inside out, or more of a fuse type of situation going around. And we just found that we could kind of do that forever, and we had to really chop away a bunch of the treatments because there was just so many. But it was really fun to explore how you can do heat in general in motion. So we got a nice little set to work with that did all that flexibility we needed, and then started expanding that into more textural patterns, how you bring that idea into 3D, so using the edges of the model to kind of do this lava, shiny treatment going through, going to the classics of heat maps and just playing around with them, and again, just having a lot of parts to work with in that. But I think my favorite section to explore of this was how you start to bring these elements together, and that came a lot for me in transition. So getting that feeling of heat passing through stuff from screen to screen, burning away what was there before, and transitioning between words and moments. This was a very collaborative process. We were passing the files around between a bunch of motion designers. And this one came about a bit by accident, which was, I got someone's file, and I was just trying to delete their work to do something new. And for some reason, it wasn't really working, and I kept getting these weird cuts with like a blurry thing. It just reminded me of when you stare like to a really bright light or the sun or a flame, and then everywhere you look, you keep seeing that same shape, like an after image. And we actually thought that's a great concept for the whole heat idea. And it's just a nice thing as a brand to be like left behind and engraved in your eyes. So even little things like how you cut footage and how you cut images and logos can have a touch of brand personality in. So again, that just all built some nice transitioning moments that we can use and play with. And also looking into the design, we had this really cool variable typeface. It just got wider and wider and more slanted. And at the start, we were just playing with it as you do, like making it fat, making it thin again. And we quickly just started making rules around it. So if it's about heat and intensity, does it only ever get wider and more slanted and never go back on itself, because that's kind of killing the heat in a way. So we start putting all those elements together and just playing around and creating a system that allowed you to have more premium moments, but as well more playful things on game day. This was one of the really fun things to go and do, is go to the stadium and put the animations on the big screen like they would be on game day and see if they actually work. And yeah, that was fun. But that was Spurs. It was very much about just getting an idea and through motion, going at it hard and trying to get the personality in. Second project I'm going to talk about is for WTA. For those who don't know, that's Women's Tennis Association. They were one of those clients that, as soon as we started hearing about their backstory and what they do, it quite quickly became a dream project. They're really, really badass. If you ever want to go look it up, it's quite a fun story behind them. But they're kind of like entity in tennis. They organize a lot of the tournaments, but they also support their players a lot and have done a great work over the years. So we worked with them on a bunch of stuff. I'm going to first talk through visual identity motion that we did for them before I go into the one that I actually want to talk about, being motion first, just to give you some context. So, sizzle next. So this is vaguely the visual world of WTA now. They're really cool. They really stand for some great stuff. They're one of the big reasons why women's tennis is an actual professional sport that gets paid for. And they've always done that through like this really like rebel spirit attitude of making change. So when we start working with them, three key things is that the work needed to be championing of their players, of people in the community. They wanted to inspire people, and something that they were perhaps struggling a bit more with was that magnetic feeling of people being attracted to them. They were starting to become a bit more of a background entity, and they wanted to be at the forefront again. So we took this into everything we did. The visual system is quite simple in its idea, so it's just about unlocking the court. You take the shape of it and you kind of go wild with it and do whatever you want. It's quite simple, but it works, and you get a lot of flexibility. So we started playing with everything you can do with just a single panel, whether that's moving it, stretching it, making it grow, splitting it into more panels. And we wanted to really capture what it felt like being on the court and watching those players doing all the cool stuff that they do. So a lot of that came through the type and playing around with all the different weights of it and how you animate it. So a lot of it was just about getting the excitement through and the impact, but we started getting inspired as well by actual tennis shots and little things like when you serve, you first throw the ball up before you hit it. So some of the movements will have like a two-stage to complete because of that. Others will be inspired by the motion of rally back and forth. And I think for me at least, the star of the show, it's these 3D objects that they kind of got nicknamed objects of excellence, because the idea was that we wanted them to feel special and like, you know, they are elite athletes doing really cool shit, so they need to feel like they're made of a metal material or something. So we took these everyday objects that you see in every match and just made them feel special and fun. And last thing we were really trying to nail is the details, really making it feel special and crafted around everything by just playing with little things like the stroke. So all of that just came to this quite light motion principles that we did for them. So what we always wanted to anchor it in and the different techniques that we used to do that. So that led us then to starting doing a broadcast pack for them, which was a really interesting project. We went into it proper, like, all right, everything's going to be motion, so motion leads. Let's go crazy and see how that goes. And it turned out really well. It was fun. So we start like we do any project by just doing an audit of what is out there. So how does WTA currently show up? What does tennis broadcast do well, or what could we explore? And also looking at the world of entertainment, because there's something special when you sit in front of the TV and you see like massive Netflix logo and you get that moment of being like, all right, let's go. So we wanted that feeling for tennis too. And that kind of led us to what are the 3 things that we really need to nail. Obviously, it needs to drive back to WTA. So we need a logo everywhere pretty much. We need also just really memorable moments, like, what's our version of the Netflix intro. Then transporting fans courtside, so that's a tricky one because the nature of broadcast is that you're sat behind the TV, you're not there. So we really wanted to kind of close that gap a little bit for the viewers and make them feel like they're there more. And lastly, I spent 10 months watching tennis and working in tennis, and I still didn't understand the rules. It's quite hard. So we needed to make it feel accessible and that people can actually navigate the ecosystem of tennis. So we started looking at what we had in our system and how we turned that into the broadcast needs. So a lot of it was about making our movements even more expressive, adding more depth so you feel closer to the game. Our 3D objects are quite memorable. They feel like the brand, even without the logo on it. So those become our moments of iconic IP. And lastly, that cinematic entertainment feeling that we wanted everywhere. So that's where this glimmer thing came into play for us. It's all over the brand identity in static form usually. And we just started looking at it instead like, what if that's our unifying thread to do all of the navigation through broadcast, and we just make it come alive. So we started looking at what can we do with it and how it's actually helpful. So sometimes it's just there. It's always just there on screen doing its thing and spinning around. But when information is changing and you need to attract viewers' attentions, that's when you add behaviors like making it shine so people actually look at it. When complex tables or anything are about to change and you want to anticipate movement, we bring in this kind of glow thing. And going back to what the brand stands for and championing, whenever something exciting happens, we need to go crazy for it and just flood it with color. So start putting pieces together, and this just mostly came about by pissing around in After Effects and building them there, and then going back and tweaking the little bits with the help of a designer, but all of it started to be built, how the system comes to life in motion, which was quite an interesting process to go through. And when it came to making like that moment in which you sit down in front of the TV to watch tennis, we worked with a sound studio as well to create a little bit of a mnemonic for the opener. Which just does that, and it's just a nice moment to kind of get you hyped for what you're about to see. These were just my 2 favorite bits. They're quite tiny. Usually on the screen, they're about this big. So I just thought I'd really blow them up and show them off. I think there's just something nice about taking the stuff that is used very often and usually doesn't have as much thought, like the coin toss results on who's going to serve, and make use of our objects and just actually toss the coin before you reveal it. Or if we're talking about rallies, have the ball going around side to side like in a rally to reveal the information. So this was more on the creative side of what it looked like, but something that came to light during this project and trying to solve things from a motion point of view was that even the boring stuff, the brand challenges that usually we don't need to bother with, sometimes we have quite good solutions for. Like, WTA needs a logo in every single table, but they also need the sponsor logo, and they also need the rankings logo if we're talking about rankings, and then the tournament tier logo, and the tournament logo, and then if it's a final, there's also a final logo, and that's 6 logos on the screen, and the designers are sweating, and they don't really know how to make it fit. So, by just working together on it and looking at it from motion first, that was quite a very obvious solution, which is we just animate them, and that's fine. They just cycle through. And that comes to life in sequences in a more like fun way, but it can also live in all the tables that we need to do just in the corners and be quite subtle and just do its job neatly. Broadcast has a lot of restrictions on what you can and can't do because it's all live on TV. So this was a really long process of figuring out what we can and can't do, and we delivered everything from like, concepts all the way to being in, I don't really know what these guys do. They're like the proper broadcast guys building the software. So we were just sat there with making sure that whatever we'd done can actually be made in real life and checking, making sure every detail was exactly as how we'd done it initially. So it's actually a really satisfying one that doesn't happen very often. Whenever I see it on TV now, it actually looks like how we made it, which is wild and rarely ever happens. So that was quite fun, and it just became quite a nice project to work on because of that different approach. And now I get to watch it on TV, which is great. But this is just vaguely what it looks like now. Some of the key screens from it and the intros. So very much about making you feel like you're there. That's why we went with a bit of a transparent panel vibe, just to not take away from the actual game, and so you feel like you're there. But yeah, then the last project I've got to talk about is quite short and sweet. We did some work for The Economist a year ago, and at the start it was just a rebrand. Motion wasn't really involved at that point, it was quite straightforward. But then they wanted a campaign, and this was quite fun because they're all about the copywriting. It's very smart, it's very like witty, and it uses very few words to convey something that once you get, it's meant to be like a bit of a smile in the mind moment for you. And that poses its own challenge because we're writing these things, and then what do the visuals do? Do they just, red background with the type is nice, and it works in some cases, but we wanted to take it a bit further, especially for the TV commercials. So we started playing around with it, and this was a very fluid project. It was motion and design and strategy and copy just huddled around the table at all times, spitting things back and forth between us. So, just starting to play with the language, like what can you do with just type, really taking a step back and doing the bare minimum of motion to express the ideas. So things like, can we also then fuck with the words a little bit, and it's not just bend the rules, it's rule the bends on the next frame. And if we're talking about thinking around corners without adding many elements, how do you do that? This was one of my favorite tests. None of this actually made it to the campaign, but it was just really simple about seeing pictures in full and you slowly reveal it. Again, seeing things from a different angle. This one was, I didn't realize that the word crumble and crumple were different words, so I spent an hour by the scanner doing this, and it was completely useless, but it was fun. Anyway, this kind of thinking kind of led to our proper TV ad campaign, which I'm going to play. It's very simple.
When logic bends and certainties shatter, when markets react and power tilts, when left is right and right is left, which way do you turn? The Economist goes beyond the headlines, more than news, a trusted global perspective. The Economist, know which way is up.
So, know which way is up is kind of the concept of the whole campaign. And as we were playing around with this line and, turning it upside down and all that, we kind of got intrigued by, it's actually really nice when it is upside down and it's saying know which way is up, and that kind of like reverse meaning goes really well with The Economist and how they talk and communicate. So that was our next step. It was, what if we just do that on everything, and whenever the word says top, we go down, and when it says bottom, we go up, left goes right, right goes left, and so forth. And that kind of thing then started influencing how we were writing and the strategy of the campaign. which led to a whole new TV campaign.
Down, up, right, left, inside, out. Sometimes it's hard to make sense from nonsense. The Economist goes beyond the headlines. More than news, a trusted global perspective. The Economist, know which way is up.
Also, this was our first go at making like TV ads, so the sound is pretty DIY. It's quite rough. I'm no sound engineer, so sorry about that. But then that bled into what the actual static was doing. So how do you take that thinking in motion and apply it to the out-of-home campaign by just switching the words and freezing that frame? Same for down and up. And then the last part of that campaign was in New York, in which we tried to take advantage of the location. So like, if stuff was by the escalators, then we use the down-up copy and those animations. If it's in a corridor, we use more the right and left kind of stuff. And it was just a very interesting way of working with design and strategy that didn't fall into the linear strategy first, then design, then motion. And we ended up doing more campaigns out of it and getting more TV scripts because of what we did in motion, then fed back into the rest. So that was just fun. And yeah, that's all.